Did she really just see a briefcase lying on the wet pavement as the city lights blurred through the rain? Claire Bennett froze, every nerve on fire, her breath coming in short bursts, as she realized it was no ordinary bag. It was a finely crafted leather briefcase, polished edges glinting even under the flickering streetlights, the kind of thing that could belong to someone powerful. The alley was empty, or so it seemed, but shadows moved at the corners of her vision, and every instinct screamed she was being watched. Hard hammering, Claire bent to pick it up, feeling the weight press against her palms, the leather smooth yet heavy, carrying more than just papers. She glanced over her shoulder. Nobody was there, yet a chill ran down her spine. Somewhere above, a faint hum of a black SUV approached, tires slicing through puddles, and the low glow of its headlights sent a shiver of dread through her. She straightened, decision made, and started moving, one careful step after another, every sense alert. The rain made the pavement slippery, each footfall echoing against the brick walls like a warning. Claire could hear the distant hum of the city, muffled and surreal, as she neared the main street. Then she saw him, barely a silhouette against the glowing backdrop of towering skyscrapers, Jasper Vance, the man whose name made even seasoned criminals lower their voices, standing still, his posture commanding yet unreadable, observing without moving. The world seemed to shrink, each second stretching into eternity, and Claire's chest tightened as she took a deep, shaky breath. She had the briefcase. She had to get it to him. One wrong step and the night could turn deadly. She darted across the last block, puddles splashing at her feet, glancing at the imposing building that housed Jasper's empire. A man in a dark suit appeared near the entrance, but a subtle nod from Jasper told him to hold back. Claire's fingers trembled as she approached the gates, the weight of the leather a constant reminder that this moment could change everything. She extended the briefcase toward Jasper, eyes locked on his, searching for any hint of anger or approval. His expression was unreadable, a slight narrowing of steel-gray eyes, yet something shifted, a fleeting recognition, a subtle acknowledgement of her courage. The guards around him stiffened, questioning her presence, but Jasper's motion stopped them instantly, and Claire felt a surge of relief mingled with awe. Every heartbeat was loud in her ears, each breath sharp and ragged, as she realized she had stepped into a world far beyond anything she had known. A light drizzle blurred the neon reflections on the street, and she could barely process the weight of what just happened, the gravity of her act, and the man standing mere feet away who could change her life forever. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, broken only by the distant city sounds, yet the tension was palpable, electric, waiting for the next move that neither of them could predict. Claire did not know what would come next, only that her life had shifted irreversibly, and the city seemed to hold its breath, leaving a question lingering in the air, waiting to be answered in the moments to follow. Claire Bennett stepped back from the gates, her hands still trembling from the weight of the briefcase, and the rain-slicked street seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Every drop of water dripping from the streetlights reflected like tiny mirrors, each one magnifying the uncertainty pressing down on her chest. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, but it felt muted, like the city itself was holding its breath. Jasper Vance watched her every move, his steel-gray eyes unwavering, assessing, calculating, and for the first time, Claire felt seen not as invisible, but as someone who mattered. Miles, standing just behind Jasper, shifted his stance slightly, a silent reminder of the rules she was now stepping into, yet he made no move to intervene, leaving her to navigate this delicate balance on her own. Claire swallowed hard, unsure whether she had done the right thing or whether a single misstep could undo everything. The briefcase felt heavier now, not just because of its contents, but because it represented the unexpected weight of consequence. She glanced at Jasper again, noticing the subtle twitch of his lips, a fraction of a movement that might have been a smile or a flicker of approval. She did not dare hope, yet a spark ignited, fragile but undeniable. The cold wind pushed against her coat, tangling her hair across her face, but she did not move to brush it away, unwilling to break the moment. Every sound, every shadow seemed to heighten her awareness, and yet beneath the fear, a strange pulse of courage thrummed in her chest. Jasper finally stepped forward, each movement deliberate, almost silent on the wet pavement, and Claire instinctively straightened, hard hammering, preparing herself for what might come next. He held out a hand, not in threat, but as a gesture of acknowledgement, and she felt an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, the tension still sharp, but no longer suffocating. A car door slammed somewhere nearby, startling her, and she caught the faintest glance from Jasper, a silent promise or a question she could not yet answer. The city lights flickered against the surface of the briefcase, reflecting the stormy sky above, and Claire realized that every choice she had made, every step, had led her to this precarious intersection of fear and possibility. She did not know what Jasper Vance would decide, or how deeply this encounter might affect the life she had fought so hard to survive. Yet she felt the weight of something larger than herself settling onto her shoulders, a sense of responsibility entwined with the thrill of being noticed, of maturing in a world where she had always felt invisible. Each breath she drew was sharp, tinged with anticipation, and she felt the city itself pulse with unspoken potential. Miles shifted again, subtle but unmistakable, a reminder that while one moment could change everything, the world beyond the gates remained watchful, unpredictable, and relentless. Claire's eyes met Jasper's one more time, and in that silent exchange, the air seemed to thrum with unvoiced possibilities, a connection forming that neither of them could yet define. The rain fell harder, drumming against the pavement like a countdown, each beat urging Claire forward, yet she remained frozen for a heartbeat longer, caught between the fear of the unknown and the pull of what might be her first real chance at something better. She stepped back slightly, feeling the first real stirrings of hope mingled with dread, and for a fleeting moment, wondered whether she had entered a world where courage alone could open doors or whether the next step would demand far more than she imagined. The night stretched on, the city lights reflecting in her wide eyes, and Claire knew, without fully understanding why, that nothing would ever be the same, and the question of what came next lingered, sharp and insistent, just beyond her grasp. Claire Bennett felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her like the storm clouds overhead. Every drop of rain seemed sharper now, each puddle reflecting the harsh glow of the city lights as if to remind her that nothing was simple, nothing was safe. Jasper Vance had stepped closer, his presence commanding and cold, yet there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, a question she could not read. Claire's palms were slick with rain, gripping the briefcase tighter as the stakes of her choice crystallized in her mind. She could feel the city holding its breath around them, the distant hum of traffic fading into an almost suffocating quiet, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Miles shifted slightly behind Jasper, his gaze sharp, assessing every micro-expression, every tremor in Claire's posture, and she realized the depth of scrutiny she was under. Fear tangled with resolve, and she lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet Jasper's piercing gaze, knowing that any hesitation could tilt the balance against her. The briefcase felt heavier now, not just because of its contents, but because it symbolized a test, a challenge of trust, a gamble on her own courage. Claire's eyes flicked to the building behind Jasper, the towering structure hinting at the vast influence and reach he commanded, and the realization that one wrong step could unravel everything made her stomach tighten. Jasper studied her quietly, calculating, weighing, and in that silence, a tension built that seemed almost tangible, pressing against her chest. Every breath she drew was measured, each step forward deliberate, a silent negotiation between fear and the impulse to do the right thing. The air between them thrummed with unspoken questions and invisible consequences. Claire felt the pull of opportunity, the possibility of a life shifting dramatically, but also the lurking danger that she could easily misstep and be cast aside, unnoticed and unprotected. Miles' stance remained still but unwavering, a constant reminder of the rules and hierarchy she was navigating, while Jasper's subtle gestures and the slight narrowing of his eyes hinted at an internal judgment she could not yet decipher. A gust of wind swept across the street, rattling the briefcase in her hands and lifting a strand of her wet hair across her face, and she did not move to brush it away, unwilling to break the fragile rhythm of this moment. Every detail felt magnified, the glint of metal, the distant lights, the faint rustle of papers inside the briefcase, and Claire understood that the simplest movement could carry weight far beyond what she imagined. Jasper finally exhaled softly, a sound almost lost beneath the rain, yet it struck her with the gravity of decision, and the tension in her chest both tightened and released in that instant. Her courage, small but unwavering, seemed to resonate against the quiet power emanating from him, a fragile bridge between worlds she had never imagined she could enter. The night stretched around them, thick with possibility and uncertainty, and Claire sensed that the encounter was far from over, that a new chapter of challenge and discovery had begun, with consequences that would unfold long after the rain stopped. And as she looked up, the briefcase still clutched tightly in her hands, she noticed a small emblem she had not seen before, etched subtly into the leather, a mark that hinted at secrets even deeper than she could have guessed. The rain intensified, drumming against the pavement like a warning, each drop sharp and insistent. Claire Bennett felt the briefcase pressing against her side, heavier than before, as if it carried not only documents, but the weight of expectation and consequence. Jasper Vance's eyes followed every movement, unblinking, his presence towering and silent, yet filled with an almost tangible pressure that made her chest tighten. Every step forward was measured, each breath shallow, and the city around them seemed to blur into a tense haze where only the two of them existed. The lights from nearby skyscrapers reflected in puddles at her feet, distorted and uncertain, mirroring her own conflicting emotions, fear, curiosity, and a flicker of hope she could barely recognize. Miles remained a quiet sentinel at Jasper's side, a reminder of the boundaries she had crossed and the scrutiny she now faced. Claire's mind raced. She knew that delivering the briefcase was only the beginning. Inside, she sensed secrets that could shift alliances, unravel carefully laid plans, and expose vulnerabilities she had no right to witness. Jasper stepped closer, and the subtle movement, almost imperceptible, sent a jolt through her nerves. His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing slightly, weighing her courage, questioning her intentions, and she felt the raw edge of tension sharpening between them. Each second stretched, drawn taut with unspoken questions, and Claire realized she had entered a space where ordinary rules did not apply. The briefcase felt heavier still, a physical symbol of trust and risk, and as her fingers tightened around the handle, she felt the first stirrings of determination ripple through her fear. A flicker of movement from the shadows drew her attention, a pedestrian hurrying past, oblivious, and yet it reminded her of the delicate balance of chance and timing she was navigating. Jasper's gaze did not waver. It settled on her with an intensity that both intimidated and compelled her. She could feel the power dynamic shifting subtly, her act of courage placing her momentarily at the center of a silent negotiation she did not fully understand. The night air was thick, almost suffocating, carrying with it the scent of rain, asphalt, and distant exhaust, each inhale a reminder of the stakes pressing down. Miles's stance, still and controlled, reinforced the seriousness of the situation, yet he made no move to intervene, leaving Claire alone in this precarious interaction. Her heartbeat surged, a rhythmic drum of anticipation, as Jasper's hand hovered slightly over the briefcase, either taking it nor retreating, a silent question suspended in the air. Every muscle in her body tensed, ready to react to the smallest shift in the encounter. Claire's thoughts spun, considering the consequences, the risks, and the possibilities, and a realization hit her. The choice she made in the next heartbeat could redefine her life entirely. The city around them faded further into the periphery, the glow of neon and the patter of rain amplifying the intensity of the moment. Jasper's voice, low and measured, broke the silence, and even without words, Claire sensed a decision forming, a judgment that would either open doors or close them irrevocably. The rain fell harder, each drop a punctuation on the fragile tension, and Claire knew that the balance of power, trust, and opportunity hung by a thread, waiting for the next move. She inhaled sharply, bracing herself, and in that suspended heartbeat, she recognized that the moment demanded more than courage, it demanded clarity, and the choice she was about to make would tip the scales between safety and consequence. Claire Bennett felt the tension in her chest shift as Jasper Vance took a measured step closer, the rain falling in a steady rhythm around them, each drop accentuating the quiet intensity between the two. The briefcase still rested in her hands, but its weight now carried a different meaning, a silent acknowledgement of trust and risk, a bridge between her fear and his scrutiny. Jasper's gaze softened imperceptibly, a flicker of curiosity and consideration that made her stomach tighten with both apprehension and relief. Miles remained at the edge, vigilant yet passive, allowing the subtle shift in dynamics to unfold without interference. Claire noticed the faint crease of thought across Jasper's forehead, the way his shoulders slightly relaxed, and for the first time, she sensed an unspoken connection forming, fragile but undeniable. The city around them blurred further into shadows, the neon reflections catching in the puddles like fragments of possibility, each glint reminding her that she had crossed into a world far beyond her own. Claire's breath steadied as she realized her actions had altered the balance, not through force, but through courage, presence, and the audacity to act. Jasper's hand hovered near the briefcase, and she felt the almost magnetic tension, a pull of power tempered by consideration, and the awareness that he was weighing her not as a stranger, but as someone capable of judgment, resilience, and discretion. Each second was elongated, pregnant with anticipation, as she recognized that the stakes had shifted. She was no longer just a courier of lost property, but a participant in a delicate negotiation of trust. The rain intensified for a moment, a sharp reminder of the unpredictability of the night, and she adjusted her stance, ready to respond to the slightest cue. Jasper finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate, each word carefully measured, revealing hints of expectation and subtle challenge, yet leaving the conclusion suspended, inviting her to act, to demonstrate her reliability and resolve. Claire's heartbeat surged in rhythm with the drum of raindrops on asphalt, each beat reinforcing the fragile empowerment she felt, mingled with the persistent awareness of potential consequence. In that suspended exchange, the dynamic between them crystallized, a silent acknowledgement that her courage and discretion had earned attention, respect, and a measure of influence in a world she had never dared enter. The briefcase was no longer just a container of documents, it had become the symbol of a tenuous bond, a hinge on which their interaction and trust now pivoted. Claire realized that this single act had the potential to redefine her position in Jasper's world, yet the uncertainty remained, the tension palpable, as she waited, poised between fear and possibility. The wind gusted through the alley, sending a shiver down her spine, and she tightened her grip, bracing for the next motion, the next decision, aware that the next words or gesture could tip the balance completely. As she inhaled the cool, damp air, she sensed that the encounter had reached a turning point, and the choice she was about to make would determine the course of her life and the nature of her connection with Jasper, leaving her poised on the precipice of transformation. Claire Bennett felt her pulse spike as Jasper Vance stepped closer, the night air pressing heavy around them, rain slicking the pavement under their feet, reflecting the city lights in fractured shards. Every instinct screamed caution, yet she held the briefcase firmly, aware that one misstep could unravel the fragile trust she had begun to earn. Jasper's eyes scanned her face with measured intensity, reading every micro-expression, every flicker of doubt or resolve, and she felt the subtle shift in power between them. Miles stayed slightly behind, a silent sentinel, his presence a reminder that rules existed even here, yet he offered no intervention, letting the tension between Claire and Jasper mount. Each second stretched taut, charged with anticipation and unspoken consequences, and Claire realized the gravity of her decision to deliver the briefcase. It was more than an object, it was a test of her character, her courage, and her ability to navigate a world she had never been part of. The wind swept through the alley, lifting strands of her hair across her face, and she did not brush them away, unwilling to break the fragile rhythm of this encounter. Jasper's lips pressed into a thin line, a hint of judgment shadowed by curiosity, and Claire felt a surge of adrenaline and self-awareness, knowing that every movement was observed, every subtle reaction measured. A distant siren pierced the air, momentarily drawing her attention and heightening her alertness, reminding her of the fragility of safety in this city. She adjusted her grip on the briefcase, heart pounding, as Jasper's gaze never wavered, calculating, evaluating, and she sensed the silent negotiation unfolding in real time between courage and authority. The rain intensified, drumming on the briefcase and her shoulders, as if urging her forward while simultaneously heightening the stakes of every choice. Claire's mind raced with the possibilities of what could go wrong, yet a spark of determination coursed through her, a recognition that her actions had shifted something in Jasper's perception of her, however subtle. His eyes softened for an almost imperceptible moment, and she felt a fragile bond forming, born out of trust, courage, and mutual recognition. The distant glow of the city seemed to fade as the focus narrowed to the briefcase, the tension, and the exchange of unspoken understanding between them. Then, a sudden movement from the shadows caught Claire's eye, a figure slipping silently along the edge of the alley, unseen by anyone else, and her breath caught in her throat. The presence was deliberate, purposeful, and it sent a ripple of fear through her, a reminder that even here, amidst trust and fragile connection, danger was never far. She tightened her grip on the briefcase, every sense alert, knowing instinctively that this unexpected observer could change everything, and that the next moments would demand both courage and clarity, leaving her poised on the edge of a new and urgent challenge. Claire Bennett's hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the briefcase, the rain now a heavy curtain around them, each drop striking the pavement like a countdown. Jasper Vance's presence was immense, almost tangible, a silent force pressing against her, and she could feel the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. Every instinct screamed that one wrong movement could tip the balance, yet she stood her ground, heart racing, aware that the next seconds would define everything. His eyes, sharp and assessing, never left her face, reading every flicker of hesitation, every micro-expression, and in that unspoken evaluation, Claire felt both exposed and empowered. Miles shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of the boundaries and protocols that surrounded them, yet the decision remained squarely in Jasper's hands. The city seemed to fade, leaving only the tension between them, the rain, and the briefcase that held more than paper. It held possibility, risk, and a measure of trust that had been earned through courage. Claire inhaled, steadying herself, and then stepped forward, her voice firm yet laced with uncertainty, acknowledging the responsibility she carried. Jasper's gaze softened slightly, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of recognition that her actions mattered, that her decision to return the briefcase had shifted something fundamental in their dynamic. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears as she realized that the connection forming was delicate, a blend of mutual assessment, respect, and fragile trust. The wind gusted, sending sheets of rain against her face, and yet she did not falter, choosing to remain in that charged space, aware that courage now demanded persistence. Jasper extended a hand, a gesture of measured inclusion, and the gap between power and vulnerability narrowed, yet the stakes became immediately clearer. This was a world where mistakes carried weight, and trust was fragile. Claire felt a surge of adrenaline, the realization that her choice to stand firm had elevated her from mere observer to participant in a delicate negotiation of authority and respect. The briefcase pressed against her, heavier now with significance, and she understood that every second, every decision, would ripple far beyond the alley, shaping alliances, perceptions, and the future of her own life. Miles's watchful stance reinforced the seriousness, the silent accountability, and Claire felt the tension coil tighter, awareness sharpening with each subtle movement around her. The neon reflections on the wet asphalt flickered, capturing the intensity in her eyes, and she sensed a fragile shift in power. Momentarily, her courage had created an opening, a space where authority and vulnerability intersected. Then, without warning, a shadow detached from the darkness at the edge of the alley, moving swiftly toward them, unseen until the final moment, and Claire's heart lurched as she realized that the consequences of her actions were about to escalate in ways she could not yet predict, leaving her poised on the edge of a critical decision that would change everything in an instant. Claire Bennett felt a sudden heaviness in her chest as the shadow slipped closer, the alley narrowing and the rain blurring the neon lights into streaks of color that made every step feel uncertain. The briefcase pressed against her side like a reminder of the fragile trust she had earned, and the weight of consequence sank deeper into her bones. Jasper Vance's gaze never wavered, sharp and discerning, but now there was an edge of tension she had not felt before, a silent question of whether her courage would hold against the unseen threat. Miles shifted slightly, alert and measured, but neither intervened, leaving Claire exposed in the space between authority and danger. Every heartbeat echoed in the wet air, each breath a calculated risk, as the unknown figure emerged from the darkness, distant yet deliberate, moving with purpose toward them. Claire's stomach twisted as she realized that the choices she had made had consequences that could not be undone, that her courage had altered not only her own trajectory but the perception Jasper held of her. The rain pounded harder, soaking through her coat, yet she remained rooted, her eyes flicking between Jasper and the advancing shadow, her mind racing through possibilities and outcomes she could barely predict. Jasper's subtle shift, a tilt of his head, a narrowing of eyes, suggested an assessment, weighing the threat, the circumstance, and her response, and Claire felt the fragile balance of trust quiver under the weight of uncertainty. She drew a sharp breath, steadying her trembling hands, realizing that the alliance of circumstance they had begun to form was as delicate as glass, ready to shatter with a single misstep. Each step the shadow took resonated with amplified tension, and Claire understood that she was no longer merely delivering the briefcase. She was negotiating her own place in a world where power, perception, and courage intersected in dangerous harmony. Jasper extended his hand slightly, a gesture almost imperceptible, yet it carried authority and expectation, and Claire sensed that her next move would define not only how he saw her, but the rules of engagement in this tense, charged space. The neon reflections danced across the wet asphalt, highlighting the gravity of the moment, the subtle exchanges, and the mounting uncertainty that seemed to wrap around them like a tangible fog. Claire's breath caught as the shadow drew nearer, and in that suspended heartbeat, she realized that the stakes were higher than she had imagined, that every choice, every glance, carried weight far beyond her initial understanding. The silence between them stretched, thick and almost suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain, yet charged with unspoken possibilities, and she felt the first true tremor of anticipation for what the next second could bring, leaving the encounter poised on a knife edge of revelation and danger. Claire Bennett's eyes widened as the shadow revealed itself, not an intruder, but a courier with a sealed envelope thrust toward Jasper Vance, and the briefcase in her hands suddenly felt like a different kind of responsibility. Jasper's gaze shifted sharply to the envelope, his entire posture changing, a subtle tension releasing from his shoulders and redirecting toward the new arrival. Claire felt a ripple of uncertainty pulse through her, realizing that the careful balance she had maintained was being disrupted in an instant. The envelope bore a symbol she did not recognize, yet its presence made her pulse quicken, hinting at information that could alter everything she thought she knew about Jasper's world. Miles stepped slightly forward, alert, yet restrained, as if acknowledging the shift in authority, and Claire understood that she was now caught in the flow of power she had never imagined, a witness to decisions far beyond her previous comprehension. Jasper opened the envelope with deliberate precision, his expression unreadable, and Claire's heart raced as she caught glimpses of documents, charts, and coded notes that suggested alliances, betrayals, and stakes far higher than the simple return of a lost briefcase. Suddenly, she realized that the act that had earned her attention had also placed her in the center of a network of influence she did not fully understand, and that her choices going forward would carry weight she had not anticipated. The rain continued to fall, its rhythm sharp and urgent, echoing the rapid acceleration of events and the sudden shift in dynamics. Jasper's eyes flicked back to Claire, and in that moment, she sensed an unspoken calculation, a reevaluation of who held the upper hand, and the awareness that her courage had altered the perception of authority in ways she had never imagined. The courier retreated silently, leaving the envelope on the wet pavement beside Jasper's foot, a small gesture that carried massive implications, and Claire felt the sudden gravity of her role in this unfolding scenario. She could not move, could not speak, caught in the instant where power, trust, and revelation collided. Jasper lifted his gaze to her, a measured silence stretching between them, yet the intensity of that glance spoke volumes, and she realized that the rules had changed, that the path forward was no longer clear, and that the understanding of who was in control had shifted dramatically. The rain glistened against the surfaces around them, and Claire felt the weight of expectation, the pulse of authority, and the fragile thread of influence she now occupied, all converging in a single heartbeat. Then, without warning, Jasper's hand closed over the briefcase and the envelope simultaneously, a subtle but decisive motion that conveyed both protection and command, and Claire knew, with sudden clarity, that everything she had assumed about safety, power, and her role in this encounter had just been overturned, leaving her poised at the edge of a revelation that would redefine her place in this world. Claire Bennett's pulse raced as the rain fell harder, each drop like a drumbeat in her ears, each step forward on the slick pavement amplifying the tension that had been building for hours. Jasper Vance's presence loomed over her, a silent force of command, yet there was a subtle shift in his posture, a mixture of calculation and unexpected vulnerability that made her heart tighten. The briefcase, now in his hands, carried more than papers. It carried trust, consequence, and the weight of choices that neither of them could undo. Claire's mind spun with possibilities, realizing that every micro-movement, every word or hesitation, could tip the delicate balance between recognition and rejection, between survival and exposure. Miles's eyes flicked between them, vigilant but restrained, as if silently acknowledging that the climax of this encounter was unfolding in a space defined by courage, perception, and subtle power. The envelope still lay on the wet asphalt, a silent herald of secrets that had the potential to reshape alliances and redefine control, and Claire knew that the next second, the next gesture, would matter more than any she had taken before. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the enormity of what she faced, the understanding that this moment could determine not only her place in Jasper's world, but the trajectory of the life she had fought to reclaim. The alley seemed smaller, the neon reflections sharper, the shadows deeper, each element conspiring to heighten her awareness, to press her into a decision point she had never anticipated. Jasper's gaze met hers, unwavering, intense, demanding assessment and clarity, and Claire felt the fragile threads of trust and expectation tightening like a coil ready to snap. She inhaled sharply, the cold air stinging her lungs, grounding her in the gravity of her position, aware that her courage alone had brought her to this precipice. The storm around them intensified, a mirror of the turmoil in her chest, and each flash of lightning illuminated possibilities and consequences she could barely comprehend. The moment stretched, taut and electrifying, with every heartbeat echoing the urgency of choice, of commitment, of exposure. Claire realized that her next move would define the nature of their connection, whether temporary or lasting, and the balance of power was now precariously shared, poised on her ability to act decisively. The envelope trembled slightly in the rain, the contents unknown but pivotal, and the anticipation pressed on her like a tangible weight, the culmination of fear, courage, and trust converging into a singular, suspended instant. As Jasper's hand hovered over the documents, Claire felt the gravity of everything converging, the culmination of risk and bravery compressing time into a single, breathless heartbeat, and she understood that the choice before her was irreversible, poised to tip the scales into a new reality that neither of them could yet foresee, leaving the alley suspended in a charged, electrifying silence. Claire Bennett exhaled slowly as the rain began to ease, the city around them softening into the quiet aftermath of a storm. Jasper Vance lowered the briefcase carefully, and for the first time, the sharp intensity in his eyes softened into something almost human, a fleeting acknowledgement of the courage and resolve she had shown. Claire felt the weight of the evening lift slightly, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment mingled with lingering tension, knowing that her actions had shifted the balance between them irrevocably. Miles remained nearby, alert but restrained, a silent witness to the change in atmosphere, and Claire realized that the unspoken trust she had earned was fragile yet genuine. The glow of the street lights reflected in puddles at their feet, illuminating the subtle exchange of understanding between Claire and Jasper, each moment of silence carrying the echo of everything that had transpired. Her hands, now steady, still clutched at her coat, a reminder of the fear she had overcome, and the choices she had made under pressure. Jasper's gaze lingered for a long moment, and Claire sensed a respect that had been absent when the encounter began, a recognition of her insight, decisiveness, and resilience in a world she had only glimpsed moments before. The tension that had gripped the alley all evening gradually gave way to an unspoken truce, a quiet acknowledgement that her courage had forged a connection neither could fully articulate yet both understood. Claire felt a rush of relief, mingled with the deep satisfaction of having navigated the night with presence and integrity, aware that her life had been irrevocably altered by the encounter. The briefcase, now returned, symbolized more than trust. It marked the opening of possibilities, the fragile start of a relationship founded on respect and shared recognition of risk and character. The rain faded to a light drizzle, and the neon reflections shimmered softly, casting the alley in a calm, almost cinematic glow, a moment of quiet in the midst of chaos. Claire looked up at Jasper one last time, noting the subtle relaxation of his posture, the faint acknowledgement in his eyes, and realized that while the storm outside had passed, the impact of the night would echo within her, shaping her perspective, her resolve, and the path ahead. Each breath she took was measured, deliberate, a recognition of endurance, courage, and the fragile triumph of standing firm when the world demanded action. The silence carried weight, not emptiness, a moral echo of the choices made, the risks taken, and the understanding that integrity and bravery could shift perception, influence power, and create connection in the most unlikely of circumstances. Claire felt it deeply, the resonance of the night lingering, a quiet affirmation that even in uncertainty, one act of courage could reverberate far beyond the moment, leaving an enduring imprint of possibility and hope. Claire Bennett stepped back from the faint glow of the streetlights, the rain now reduced to a gentle drizzle, leaving the city slick and glimmering, a mirror for reflection and change. The briefcase, returned and handled with care, had left a mark far beyond its physical presence. It had shifted perceptions, opened doors, and tested courage she did not know she possessed. Jasper Vance's presence remained commanding, yet the rigid intensity had softened into a measured respect, a subtle acknowledgement of the bravery that had brought her here. Miles lingered at the edge, eyes sharp, but even he seemed to recognize the change, the fragile equilibrium now formed between authority and choice. Claire's chest rose and fell steadily as she absorbed the weight of what had transpired, understanding that every decision, every pause, had shaped not only the immediate outcome but the potential of what could come next. She felt the gravity of accountability mingled with empowerment, an awareness that her life had irrevocably shifted, that courage and integrity had forged a bridge into a world she had never believed she could touch. The alley seemed quieter now, the neon reflections gentle, almost contemplative. As if the city itself acknowledged the transformation of the night. Jasper's eyes met hers briefly, a silent exchange loaded with unspoken possibilities, the kind of moment that could have been fleeting yet carried the resonance of lasting impact. Claire recognized that she had learned the cost of presence, the necessity of decisiveness, and the quiet power of being seen, understood, and trusted in a realm defined by influence and careful calculation. Each breath she took was deliberate, the rhythm steady, echoing the resolve that had grown within her through fear, hesitation, and careful observation. The briefcase lay closed now, symbolically heavy with both responsibility and the subtle promise of connection, a reminder that choices carry consequences, and bravery can alter dynamics in ways invisible to the untrained eye. A distant hum of traffic, the faint flicker of neon, and the gentle dripping of water from nearby rooftops filled the moment with quiet tension, a reminder that life in the city continued, yet the evening had left its indelible mark on both Claire and Jasper. She felt a shift inside herself, a clarity born of challenge, a newfound understanding of influence and trust, and an awareness that the night's events were only the beginning of a journey whose outcomes were yet unwritten. As she adjusted her coat and stepped toward the edge of the alley, she caught a glimpse of a small emblem on the briefcase she had not noticed before, subtle and cryptic, hinting at connections and secrets still to be revealed, leaving her heart quickened with anticipation and curiosity, a quiet signal that the story was far from complete and that the next chapter awaited beyond the shadows of the city. Claire Bennett stepped fully into the soft glow of the streetlights, rain now a gentle drizzle reflecting the city in a tranquil shimmer, and felt the finality of the night settle around her like a quiet curtain. Jasper Vance adjusted the briefcase on his arm, the subtle weight a reminder of both trust and consequence, and for the first time, he offered a nod that conveyed acknowledgement, approval, and a silent promise that her courage had not gone unnoticed. Claire's chest rose and fell steadily as a profound calm replaced the tension that had gripped her from the first step into the alley, a slow realization that her choices had shaped a new reality, one in which she had earned respect, influence, and a measure of safety. Miles lingered slightly behind, eyes still vigilant, yet even he seemed to sense the closure of the conflict, the end of an urgent moment now transitioning into potential opportunity. The briefcase no longer carried merely documents. It represented the bridge between worlds, the passage from fear into agency, a symbol of the power of deliberate action and integrity. Claire's hands relaxed, and for the first time she felt the weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by clarity and confidence, understanding that her courage and discretion had forged a connection that could endure beyond the rain-soaked street. The neon reflections shimmered softly in puddles around her feet, and she glimpsed the subtle contours of Jasper's face, the hardened edges softened by quiet acknowledgement, a resonance of mutual understanding that needed no words. Claire felt a surge of satisfaction and relief, a recognition that the night had demanded everything from her, and yet had given her something far greater, a sense of agency, a confirmation of strength she had doubted, and the first taste of a future shaped by her own choices. The alley, the rain, the soft hum of distant traffic, all blended into a quiet, cinematic closure, leaving behind the echo of tension and triumph, the subtle promise of continued challenge tempered by the knowledge that she had proven herself. Jasper's hand remained close to the briefcase, a subtle gesture of protection and shared accountability, and Claire sensed the unspoken trust that now existed between them, fragile but real. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, grounding herself in the completeness of the moment, and understanding that courage had a price but also a profound reward. As the last droplets of rain fell, Claire glanced at the briefcase once more, noting the small emblem she had glimpsed earlier, a symbol of secrets and connections yet to be revealed, and felt the quiet thrill of anticipation for the journey ahead. The city seemed to exhale around them, the tension dissolved into possibility, and she understood that while the night's conflicts were resolved, the lessons, the growth, and the bonds forged would ripple forward, leaving an indelible mark on her life. In that reflective moment, she realized that bravery, integrity, and the courage to act had the power to transform not just circumstances, but the very trajectory of a life, and that the echo of those choices would linger far longer than the rain on the asphalt.